Okay, folks, I'd like to welcome everybody to our meeting. Thank you. Welcome everybody to our meeting on November the 4th. And I'd like to start off the meeting by saying that the Aboriginal Acknowledgement, we would like to acknowledge the land to which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Tanaha, the Silix and the Senex peoples, and is home to the Metis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land, rivers, and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And with that, I'd like to just say that we're a few days away from November the 11th, Remembrance Day. And I'd like to say to the public of our community, the members of our community, that ask you to join myself and council on November the 11th right here in the City Hall Plaza to pay homage to those who give so much and sacrifice to make our community and our country what it is today. So, and with that, we'll move on to the regular meeting, and I'd like to, is there any late items that are being introduced? I don't think so. Hearing none.
We should release the decision. Oh shoot. Oh no, we can do that.
We have to finish that later. Yeah.
No, that was from last time.
Introduction of late items, there are none. Adoption of the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Renwick and seconded by Councillor Woodward. All in favour? Thank you. Adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting.
I'll move items 5A through C. I'll
Thank
second
you
that.
very much, Councillor Morrison. Seconded by Councillor Anderson. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. And special regular council meeting. Items closed to the public on the 7th of October. And we'll do these together. And the public hearing October 7th and the regular council meeting October the 7th.
We just did
We
that.
just
did that.
I just moved the second, got second, and we moved
Thank
that.
you. And the recommendations from the committee of the whole, there are none. And the next item on the agenda is the lane access to Hall Street. And that's, I just want to put a qualifier on that. This is here for information only. It's not here for decision, just so council knows. So would somebody like to move receipt, please? Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments? All in favour?
Talking about 7A?
I'm talking about
9A.
9A.
Or sorry, 7A. You're right.
7A.
Yeah, there's a recommendation in here. There's a recommendation.
Yeah, so I did talk to the developer of the assisted care home and Mr. Lake, and I said, would council's already made this decision in the past, and both what I said is that, you know, obviously with that development, like any street, we will evaluate that when, you know, that development happens, and at that time determine whether there needs to be any change from what the current situation is, and both were satisfied with that. And yeah, so nothing's going to happen until they indicated that they're looking at spring of 2020 to start that project, and we'll work with them. And there's some significant change on that lane, then we'd bring that back to council at that time and revisit if we need. If not, then it would continue as is.
Okay.
That's sort of where we're at.
okay.
We just wanted to give you what work we've done to date and what the potential cost of that is.
So rather than moving the recommendation, can we just move receipts?
Receipts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll move receipts.
Okay. Second, all in favour? Thanks very much. Thank you. If you have any further questions about that, you can drop in and see Sarah again. And the next one is the Metis flag, and that's B on 7B. Nelson Area Metis Society has requested that the Metis flag be raised at City Hall from November 15th through the 22nd, 2019 in recognition of Metis Week. Staff is also recommending amendment to the flag protocol policy to incorporate the raising of those temporary flags that are raised by the federal and provincial governments.
I'll move
And on the bottom, there's a recommendation that the city, which one?
the first one. I'll move the first one.
Moving that the City of Nelson raise the Metis flag at City Hall from November 15th through the 22nd.
Second.
Second by Councillor Woodward. Questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. That's it.
No, we have to go to number 2, because you just did number
If you
1.
want, if you wish to move it, yeah.
Yeah.
You want to move number 2? That the flag protocol policy and amended, as amended to provide that the city may raise the same temporary flags as flown by the BC provincial and federal governments as adopted. Moved by
second.
Councillor Anderson and second by Councillor Page.
And I would just like to speak to it. So I actually am going to ask for, I should have asked for it earlier, an amendment. So when we get into the policy, where it says other flags, point 2, I think that we should strike that from the policy, and just because it says such flags are only eligible to be raised on the days that the federal or provincial government raises them. But we do know, for instance, the Pride flag, we've raised it when we celebrate Pride. If we only raise it when the provincial or federal government acknowledges Pride, then we might, when we're actually celebrating Pride in our community, we're not able to raise that flag because Pride might be celebrated in Ottawa or in Victoria at a different time, and that would be when they'd be likely raising those flags. So I think if we just strike that, so my amendment would be just to strike that phrase from the policy, and otherwise it's fine.
Wouldn't the Pride Week be Pride Week all over the country?
No,
It's not.
Pride Day is
different in
different, is it?
every,
It's different.
every
Okay.
jurisdiction is different.
You're moving amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, need a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Lochtenberg, questions or comments? On the amendment now, go ahead.
Does this not contravene our flags and banner policy?
No.
We don't have banners,
Right?
Banners are no.
but only flags.
Flags only.
So
So it doesn't
Provincial
contravene,
and
it doesn't
fed-
contravene what's already in there, in the flag policy.
this is
This
an
is- this
addition
is
to
the
the
Okay.
flag policy.
Okay,
This will be
sorry.
added to it, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not specific to the Pride flag, is that what you're saying?
No, but I mean, it would enable us
Just
to
so
have a
we're
little
clear.
bit of flexibility when there's, when we're celebrating something for whatever reason in Nelson that doesn't coincide with the provincial or federal government, but the provincial and federal government has already recognized those flags, and therefore we'd be able to fly those flags. It's just,
Okay, so we're on the amendment, all in favor? Carried. Now the motion with the amendment added,
All in
we had a,
favor?
all in favor? Carried, thanks very much. Good, onward and upward. Next item on the agenda is 45 Government Road. The property owner has applied to,
I'm gonna recuse myself.
so Councillor Anderson, just make it clear what you're doing, so,
Oh, I'm gonna recuse myself.
okay, excuse me, do it in the microphone. So
sorry.
we have a record.
I'm going to be recusing myself.
Thank you. The property owner has applied to allow for an indoor cannabis operation use at 45 Government Road while otherwise maintaining the existing MU mixed-use zoning. The purpose of the application is to build an indoor cannabis cultivation facility licensed by Health Canada to supply the legal cannabis market. Council is requested to pass the first and second reading of the zoning amendment bylaw number 3466/2019. There's a full package here that council, I'm sure, has gone through. If you have questions, that's fine. But there's also a recommendation here from staff. In fact, there's 3 of them.
I'll move.
You're moving one,
I'll move one.
that the zoning amendment bylaw number 3466/2019 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Woodward, Councillor Lochtenberg, Councillor Woodward. Questions or comments? Councillor Morrison?
So, I don't know if this is the right time to speak to this, but I'm going to, and somebody can tell me if I'm at the wrong motion. But I'm speaking against this rezoning application. And I know there'll be those that'll say it's because it's cannabis, but that's not correct. I'm against this rezoning, well, in part for this particular type of business because of the fact that I'm concerned about what our future water utilization is going to look like. This is a water intensive as well as energy intensive industry. And I'm wondering if it's not actually better suited to be outside the city of Nelson where perhaps they could use well or other sources of water. As we see the development of Railtown, let alone developments that are scheduled for other areas of Nelson and up in the Rosemont area, Water is going to continue to be a concern here for our residents. We made this pledge as councillors to be looking at everything through a climate change or climate focused lens. And I see, particularly at full build out, I see this as a massive water utilization, this business. And so I just want to state that I really feel that this is better served in the regional district. And like I say, I have concerns. I have concerns that we're actually putting this into some further zoning changes, and I'll be speaking to it later on when we look at more zoning changes in this area about having cultivation down in of anything in the Railtown area. This isn't just about today, it's about the future. And we're looking at putting in EV charging stations. We've got a number of things here that are really going to affect the ability of the city of Nelson to meet the demands. This is a hot button area. People want to live here. People are coming. And I think that we have to really give consideration to our domestic water usage. And unfortunately, as it is, I mean, all of these places will be getting purified domestic water. So I do want us to be very cautious about approving these kinds of businesses going forward. I have to say I love my craft breweries, but I'm not too sure if another one was coming to town that I would be speaking any differently about it in terms of what are we going to do about water. I look forward to having a fully fleshed out, mind the pun, discussion of this probably at future budget meetings as we look at water utilizations and metering, and if we're going to continue down this road, whether or not we actually have to take that leap, good or bad, into metering everything and everybody in the city of Nelson going forward, which we know budgetary wise has a significant taxpayer cost to look at having to do water metering for the citizens of Nelson.
Thank you. Any further comments?
I would just echo Councillor Morrison's concerns. I think this is a great presentation. I like the project. I am a little concerned at when we get to, if it gets to phase 2 at the water consumption. So yeah, I think it requires some further investigation.
Councillor Lockenberg?
Question for Alex about the water issue in particular, because it is a large amount of water usage. But what I'm interested in hearing about are the possibilities of using lake water for this. Is there any possibility as opposed to drawing from our current water system?
Not that I know of. Perhaps I might not be the best person to speak to this. Actually, last I looked.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sorry, Alex Toom, a planner here in Development Services. I saw Colin Innes here as well, who might be better suited to kind of speak to that water consumption issue. In the phase 1 level, Public Works, made the equivalency of this. Is we're looking at, about 3 to 4 single-family dwelling worth of water consumption from this facility at the phase 1 level. And that's based on the numbers that are submitted by the applicant, which is based on the technologies that they're using. There's not a way to necessarily hold them to that. That is true. But Mr. Innes did also request that a water meter be installed to this property if it does get approved.
So, Colin, do you want to? Maybe give some context of this compared to other large water users like a micro.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I have to apologize. I wasn't expecting to speak on this item here, but I can certainly give you my weigh in. When we asked the proponent of the project for their water use, they provided that to us. One of the things that we were worried about too was the way in which water was going to be used. My understanding is that with this, they'll be watering in pots as opposed to using some other system in which water is flowing through it, whether a hydroponic system, etc. The amount of water that they've asked, as Mr. Toom has indicated, is about the equivalent of about 3 households at this point. Although with that, I know that I certainly Not being familiar with this kind of activity myself, ever have any experience in this, I just figured that, okay, I would be prepared to take them at what they're telling me, but I also thought that it would be appropriate to meter that, and so we could monitor that. In comparison to a thing like a hotel or a restaurant, this would be, from what's been presented to us, to represent a lower water use than those as it's presented.
Colin, I've got a question for you, if you don't mind. In your report, you're talking about metering. What if the meter showed that the water consumption was higher than what's dictated in this report here? What does that mean at the end of the day? It just means you charge more, or does it mean you stop the project?
Well, thank you for the question, Your Worship. I guess I hadn't fully contemplated that. My thinking was as if what they were intending to provide as water use wasn't as it is. I was thinking that it would be something where we could, as in other cases, indicate that we're looking to apply a metered rate to it, of which we've found the entities of which we've indicated that we're looking to apply a metered rate to them. They've indicated that they have an interest to reduce their water usage. So I was intending to at least have it as a lever that we could use to try to restrict water usage or reduce their water usage.
So supplemental to that, if you don't mind, would that not put the developer in between a bit of a rock and a hard place? Where, I mean, his water consumption, they've probably figured that out pretty good. If they reduced it, would it mean that their product would fail? So like, I can't see how the meter makes it. I'm not suggesting there shouldn't be a meter, but I can't see how the meter fixes what Councillor Morrison is talking about.
Oh, okay. Sure, I think I understand the question, Your Worship. Why I was indicating that was based on the idea that the water use that they've indicated isn't a very high commercial use of water, and so if they're with that use, if they're able to do that, it wouldn't be something where I would think that we'd be looking to reduce their water use at the levels that they've been proposing. This was more if what they had proposed was completely out of line with reality.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe. So this is whether council wants this to go to public hearing. Certainly we can get additional information from the proponent and comparable facilities that are operating now in terms of water usage. But right now we're going on the basis of what the proponent has brought forward. You obviously have various mechanisms to address that if that's a concern of council, that it would be higher than that. But right now, like I said, this is to whether you feel it has enough merit to go to public hearing.
Councillor Lockenberg.
Well, with that being said, when you see the per year numbers, it looks dramatic, but hearing that this is the equivalent of, say, a restaurant seems to be totally reasonable. And I want to stress that from the NAEDP, the Nelson and Area Economic Development Partnership, we've identified that this is the type of business that we do want to support as a region. And I think the expertise that we have here, we don't want to lose, we want to cultivate, part of the pun. And I think I heartily encourage us to at least pass this on to the next stage.
Yeah. Any further questions? So we're we've moved number 1, the zoning amendment bylaw number 3466 2019 be introduced and read a first time and second time by title only. All in favor? Thank you. Now we go to the next one, that staff be directed to schedule a public hearing. Need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Woodward, Councillor Page. Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. And 3, that the applicant, property owner, 45 Government Road, attached substantial commitment.
Sustainability commitment.
Sustainability commitment, sorry, I can't see this very good. Be included in the condition of further development permit for this project.
I'll move that.
By Councillor Woodward and second by Councillor Lockenberg. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Thank you. So just so the public knows, this is moving forward to the past first and second reading, and it's moving forward to public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is the off-street rezoning off-street parking sign bylaw amendment. In 2018, Council adopted a suite of bylaw amendments to facilitate the revitalization of Railtown as envisioned in the Sustainability Neighbourhood Action Plan, focusing on Baker Street and its proposed extension, Government Road. Staff has proposed that Council consider the SNAP recommendations for the remainder of Railtown in order to attract investment into the neighbourhood by enabling more flexibility and options in land use. Council is now requested to pass introductory reading to the zoning amendment bylaw number 3473, off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw 3474, and the sign amendment bylaw 3475. And once again, there's a comprehensive package here for council, and there are recommendations, a number of them actually, 6 of them. And let's get started. If you're like what you see in front of you, I'd like to see if there's a mover for number 1. Councillor Lochtenberg and Councillor Woodward seconded. Any questions or comments? Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm going to speak. Excuse me, sorry. I just lost all of my notes on this. So I had some
That's
more
not good, because we know what you're like when you get going.
information. Yeah, so I apologize. I'm just going to recommend that we do not pass the first 2, actually. I think I'd like to refer them back to staff. I just noticed that in the MU3 and MU4, we're allowing, and I know that this has been brought up by community members, that we're allowing alcohol consumption, but then we're also we're going to be allowing potentially cannabis then to be cultivated in that area. But with indoor urban agriculture, it won't be in either of these zones. But then we're also not allowing any type of processing of cannabis, which I do think that when there's going to be potentially a really huge demand for people to actually process cannabis in this area. Thank you, Kristen. And processing, it can be as small as just packaging and labeling. But any micros, they're not going to be doing that. They're going to be having to work with others to actually do that work for them. So by us allowing, processing to happen here, and I think that staff's going to actually, if we're going to go this direction, they're going to have to come back with us with more details on what types of production, because certainly processing can mean several different things when it comes to cannabis. But I just think that this is potentially a good use of this zoning. It isn't as energy or water intensive as other uses, potentially a brewery. And I think that there's a lot of expertise also in this region in terms of processing with topicals and edibles, and this is just something that we should maybe consider. So I'm going to vote against these 2 motions and then refer them. I would like to see them referred back to staff just to get some more clarity on this.
So Councillor Anderson, I have to get some clarity here.
Yes.
It's my responsibility to ask you why you would excuse yourself from the last.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're okay with this one?
Yes. So my personal business, I work with cultivators. And so I'm not going to be, I have no relationship with these cultivators, but I'm not going to be, and I personally don't cultivate, but I'm not going to be making a decision specifically on one specific cultivator. In terms of packaging and processing, that is totally outside of the wheelhouse of where I work. And so they're completely different. It's a completely separate, there's separate licenses, it's separate everything. So to me, there is no conflict. I've removed myself every time I thought that there was a conflict.
Are we okay?
It's up to the council.
It's up to the counselor.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable that I have zero conflict. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So do you want to just fill us back in on what you're asking to be removed?
Yeah,
or to be added, whichever you.
No, so just for I'm going to recommend that for 1 and 2, and I know we're only speaking to 1 right now because that's been moved, but that we refer them back to staff, because I think some of the uses that we should be including aren't actually included in here, and they're excluded, and that would be, we're allowing for alcohol, we're excluding cannabis, but I think, and I'm not even looking for necessarily cultivation, but I think processing should be one of the things that that is considered in here.
So I think, Councillor Anderson, you'd be asking to move everything back to staff, because if you read through the full package,
No.
1 to 5,
Yeah, no, so it with the uses, if you look at the off-street parking landscaping, that's not going to be impacted by it, and the sign bylaw is also not going to be impacted by
You
this.
want to leave the sign bylaw and the off-street parking?
Yeah, I'm fine with those. I'm fine with those changes. It would just be 1 and 2.
I think in terms of moving this forward, there's probably no point in moving the other
Yeah,
ones.
just put the
Like
whole
this
thing
is
back.
really to
Okay.
move Railtown forward, and I guess the
Councillor,
question I would ask if council's comfortable with the rest, because this is to expand uses, we could come back and add the additional one that you're asking about. We can do that research, but I'm not sure if you want to hold up everything to do that, or you want to at least move these changes forward, so that expands the use in this area, and come back and give us a chance to do a bit more research on that other area. So it doesn't mean that it won't come into it. It just, I think there needs to be a bit more research from what I'm hearing.
No, I agree.
Councillor Morrison.
Just in speaking to this, we have the first one on the table, but regardless of that, just as I was informed in my objections to the previous motion that was brought forward, that all we're doing here is trying to get this to first and second reading and a public meeting. We still have a third reading and passing to do, so there's lots of opportunity to come back with information that comes from other sources and from the public meeting, that we can correct any thing that is missing at that time. So as much as I can find out how much water uses there might be in the last one, I think that we can look at what things we've left out of this zoning. So I would be speaking in favor of us going ahead and passing this first and second reading, and then going on to ask that staff schedule the public hearing so that these things can move on and we can start doing the development in the Railtown area that is being asked for by businesses and people in the community.
Okay, are you okay with that? Okay, so we're still on number 1 then. So you're comfortable we'll get through this, okay? That the zoning amendment bylaw number be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. All in favor? Carried. Next one is the staff schedule a public hearing. Mover and seconder, Councillor Lochtenberg, Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. And number 3, that the off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. Councillor Morrison and Councillor Renwick. All in favor? And 5 is that the sign amendment bylaw number 2019 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Yep, my notes wrong.
All in favor? And the sign amendment bylaw number 3475 2019 be read a third time by title only. Mover and seconder, Councillor Renwick and Councillor Page. All in favor? Thank you. Next was the EV charging. In order to prepare a new building for the growing number of electric vehicles on the road, staff has proposed to amend the off-street parking and landscape bylaw number to require electrical outlets adjacent to parking spaces. The first of 3 readings of the off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw number are proposed. And in front of you, Councillor, there's a full package, which I know you've gone through, and there's 2 recommendations. Now, I just want to say that you're not obligated in any of these packages to go with the recommendations. You can, as Councillor Anderson brought forward there, your options are available to you to question or change if you wish. So you have 3 options apart from the 2 that are in front of you that are recommended. And the first one is,
I'll move both actually.
okay, yeah, we can do the 2.
You have to do the first
One before the other.
We have to do it separately
Off-street
because
parking
the-
and landscape amendment, electric vehicle infrastructure. Bylaw number 3472 2019 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
I'll move.
Councillor Lochtenberg, question? Second by Councillor Page. Questions or comments? Go ahead.
Sorry, Janice. Just a question. I noticed that with sorry, again, I don't have my notes, so I'm feeling a little lost here. I was just wondering if we felt like it had gone far enough, not with just the residential, but when there was multiple spaces. I think there was going to be 1 for every 10 spots, and if we would actually want to potentially increase that. I don't know what you're, I'm missing my notes, so.
Well, to speak to that from staff's perspective, we did certainly, based on the best practices from across the province, we did certainly kind of lowball that commercial rate, so to say. In the various municipalities or so, 7 or 8 or so that do these electric vehicle charging requirements so far, it's generally 10 to 20%. Some of them that do residential and not commercial at all. So we kind of put the recommendation between those. There's some that don't require it for commercial, and some that require 20, and some that are 10. So putting it in that spot, it certainly would be feasible. It could add costs, but as explained in the report, staff don't feel that these costs are excessively burdensome. And again, there's, as also explained in the report, there's an ever increasing demand for importance on the electric vehicle market. So chances are that they would be used, but kind of taking an incremental approach. And starting sort of slower as well. Part of our thinking was a bit of a minimum requirement, and then increased sort of voluntary compliance as well too. That a lot of developers just aren't even thinking about this locally. Doesn't cross their mind. It's not that they're opposed to it. And by putting the threshold, for one space out of every 10, they're having to put that in. So at that point, they might be able to again gauge the market and say, well, I'm already putting one in, so for a few $100 more, I can add a second or a third as well too. So that was our perspective on it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Page.
Yeah, along the same lines as Councillor Anderson, I believe some of the best practice or research going out there is definitely that we want to be offloading the charging part of the cycle of these cars into the middle of the day and therefore the workplaces. And so at 1 to 10, I wonder if we want to make an amendment to move that number higher, or refer back to staff for a higher number. I think one stall, if I've got this correctly, for the first 10, and basically no requirement above that, we should definitely be shooting for a much higher EV ready, at least, component to this, because I think the demand is going to be there quite quickly. And I think given how electricity is generated and consumed, that middle of the day is the optimal time to be having these things charge.
Councillor Lockenberg.
Yeah, I'm in principle, I like the idea of increasing that minimum requirement, especially for 10. My caution on that is that, number one, we don't know if those are strictly going to be used for cars. Like, you could have a parking spot that's not used for a car, or like you could use it for other things. It's just that space made available. The second thing I had was based on what you were saying, that once you put the infrastructure in, then it's sort of the incentive is there to, if you feel like this is the incentive is there for you as a developer to put it in because it adds value to your property. So I wasn't feeling that we needed to be overly prescriptive on this, that I thought, once you get started, that's the key part, is that you've got the basic infrastructure there. But if we were to raise that, I don't know what the implications of that would be. So I think we would have to refer back to staff as opposed to just amend it here at the table.
We certainly, again, have these sort of standards that go up to 20% in British Columbia, and beyond that for commercial. So far, haven't come across any evidence, or at least not within Canada, of requirements kind of beyond that. So, so beyond 20%, if that's what you were looking at, then certainly there would good merit to look further into that.
Okay, Councillor Page.
Well, if I'm hearing correctly, I would propose an amendment to this that we move to just the 20%. That's at least a conservative. Will double where we're at, and I'm sure we can draft the proper language into the bylaw, but move from this 10% on the first 10 to 20%.
Nice third reading tonight.
I think you could do that by with just adding an amendment to this bylaw to
Change the word 1 to 2.
10% to 20.
Okay.
Just need a first and second.
I'll second it.
Yeah, I've done it.
That amendment.
Done it.
So you're moved and you're second then, so that on the amendment, all in favor? Okay, on the main motion then, it's the off-street parking landscape amendment, bylaw number 3472 2019 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. All in favor? Thank you. And that the off-street parking and landscape amendment, bylaw number 3472 2019 be read a third time by title only. Councillor Morris?
I just have a question. I don't know that you're the person that can answer this. again, just trying to look at this kind of on a bigger scale.
Could I ask somebody to move and second this?
Yeah,
or
sure.
not, please?
I
You can
thought we
move and
did,
second by
yeah.
Councillor Anderson, okay.
What is the estimated additional electricity load utilization?
I
When we
can't.
start looking at this.
It's true. I can't give you the numbers, but we did, obviously send sort of draft of this bylaw then to Nelson Hydro, and including Alex Love as well as some of the technicians, and the comments that we got back that are included in the report are that, the sentiment was that the amendment doesn't necessarily change too much for them because they are already looking at sort of the rise of the electric vehicle, if you will, and therefore they were planning for that as anyway, that people are going to be wanting more and more of these. So therefore there was no concern from Nelson Hydro on it. But in terms of the exact numbers, kilowatt hours, etc., I can't give you that right now.
So can I
So-
just
sorry.
add to that?
Just I'll ask the supplemental because I mean Fortis has lots of power to sell, so I'm not so worried about that. It's sort of two-part, and I guess I didn't answer the question very well to start with. In terms of our system, and I know that we've had system upgrades, which is very important. It's very important going forward and very important for consideration for our upcoming budget discussions. But again, it's about this load issue. As much as we can dream that people are going to park and charge their car at 2 p.m. or in the middle of the night at midnight, people are people and they charge when they want to charge. And so it was kind of a two-part. What is how much electricity is going to be potentially used, and then what is it going to do to our grid, and are we prepared? Is our grid such that it's prepared for that and for the conversion that goes? Because of course charging is DC and we get AC current, so there's a number of sort of more scientific things that have to be put into the mix in terms of our grid's ability, because there's a lot of electric. One of my concerns is there's a lot of electricity use when you're converting from AC to DC and back and forth like that all the time. And that's what you do when you charge these batteries. So I guess I want to sort of more, I guess I'm asking for a more global scientific kind of comment on it, and perhaps it'll be hydro at budget time.
Yeah, so I think we do need to look at our demand in our system, whether it's cultivation, whether it's EV, whether it's switching more to electrical heat. I think we need, where are we with district energy, where are we with some renewables. I think that whole picture needs to be fleshed out, and I would suggest that's something that you might want to consider when we set priorities, is to really have a wholesome look at where we are. I know Fortis BC has reached capacity in some areas of their system where they're not allowing large users. I know we've had some potential cultivation projects that would have doubled the whole usage, more than doubled what we're using now. So I think council really needs to understand that and really look at where your priorities around that whole mix is, and plan for that. But I think at this stage we're talking only new construction, and we're talking you're at the 240, the same as your electric dryer, right? That's the voltage of these things. But I think with the changes in energy and that whole mix of what we're trying to do on many fronts, I think it's probably pretty timely. Alex Love had asked Dan Geisler when he was here to start that review, and unfortunately Dan left, so we're a little bit behind that, but I do think it's a piece of work that we should do.
Good questions.
Thank you. I just wanted to keep it front and center on the discussion.
Yeah.
Councillor Anderson.
Just to kind of, by enabling more options, it will also then help to flatten demand. So if people are able to charge not only at home but at a commercial space and vice versa, it will help to flatten demand. That's so that's why there is benefit of having it in commercial zones, but then also definitely in residential zones. Probably what's going to happen in the future is you're going to set your car to start charging at 2 o'clock in the morning when nobody else, or when there's very little on the grid, and not at between 5 and 7 at night when everyone's.
And you can
I'm
look
not
at,
averse to having it. I mean, it's just, we need
You
to
can
give
look
some more
at pricing.
consideration.
Yeah, totally.
time of use pricing, you can.
Well, and having a battery system too would also take care of
The upside is the consumer's paying for the electricity.
Yeah,
Yes, they are.
gets John all
Free.
excited.
Okay, so all in favor then with the amendment? Carried. And that the off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw 3472 be read a third time by title only. Moved and second, moved by Councillor Page and second by Councillor Woodward. All in favor? Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Charges amendment
Alex.
bylaw. So this one's pretty simple. It's been kicked around City Hall here for quite some time, and many other city halls actually for that matter. And that the city's inter-community business license number 3356-2016 be streamlined and simplified, that the license process for business operating in multi-communities in the region. The other participants in the Kootenays communities are increasing the cost of the inter-community business license to $100. Accordingly, in order to be consistent, the City of Nelson must raise its fees to $100, which requires amendment to the fees and charges bylaw.
Moved.
Councillor Morrison,
Second.
Councillor Renwick, and let me see. So we can only do them one at a time.
Yep.
So, all in favor? Oh, sorry. Question from Councillor Page. No problem.
Yeah, I was looking for a little bit of clarification on this. Is it something that makes sense to consolidate with our current business license so that you really, when you go in to get a business license, you're only getting this one kind of license rather? Like, is there value in having these two tiers?
So you still need to have a regular business license if you've got a bricks and mortar operation here at the city. It just allows you then to go into other communities. Now again, if you've got one in Trail,
Yep.
then you have to get one in Trail and one in Nelson sort of thing.
So you get to get both.
You would have to buy both, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's mainly for contractors that are working within the different communities.
Yep.
So they can go to Castlegar or vice versa, and Trail, Roslyn.
Yeah, I'm just
This
wondering
is-
from a red tape kind of perspective, if this is something we can figure out how to make the
Well,
business
this-
license in
This
the
is
city.
streamlining it.
This
This
is
is it.
streamlining it.
This is streamlining it.
Because before you would have had to get a separate business license in
each one.
Trail and Castlegar and the Cusp and
Right.
et cetera. So this allows you to just you get them both at the same, not for that, you get them both at the same time. You just pay the extra $100
no,
to get that other.
What we need is to get everybody that's buying a business license to come and buy it here. Nelson.
Wasn't really the idea, but good point.
All right, all in favor? Carried. And number 2 is that the fees and charges amendment bylaw 3476, 2019 be read a third time.
Moved.
Councillor Renwick and Councillor Anderson, all in favor? Thank you very much. Next up is the disc golf at Art Gibbon Memorial Park. Nelson Disc Golf Society has proposed that a 9-hole disc golf course be installed in the wooded area at Art Gibbon Memorial Park. The council decision either approving or denying this proposal is now requested. Now, you're not limited to denying it or approving it for that matter, just so you know. There's no time sensitive thing here since we're heading into the winter anyway. So in front of you, council, there is a recommendation though. And if somebody wants to move it or wants to move something alternate than that, they're more than welcome to do so.
So we do have Craig here to do a bit of a,
Update?
just a bit of a presentation.
So just so the public knows, we do have an extensive package here from staff and the community for that matter, and the disc golf community as well. However, every day something seems to change, right?
Yes, it does. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Craig Stanley. I'm the Supervisor of Parks and Public Works. Staff submitted a report recommending that the City of Nelson work with the Nelson Disc Golf Society to install a 9-hole disc golf course on a 1-year trial basis at Art Gibbon Memorial Park. This presentation will hopefully provide some context to that recommendation and answer any questions you may have about that recommendation or alternatives. Really quickly, an overview of parks in Nelson and a bit of the context of where this particular park sits. The green spaces are the city-owned park, save for the NDCC, which is here central, and the golf course, which is in the lower left. Art Gibbon Memorial Park sits here, and it's the 4th park in size, so it's about 5 hectares. It's the 4th largest park in size other than Lakeside Park, the cemetery, and the tourist park. And not including the cemetery, Art Gibbon Memorial Park is the largest park in Rosemont and Uphill. So a little bit of background on the proposal. The Nelson Disc Golf Society presented their proposal at the Committee of the Whole meeting back in February. Staff have been working with the NDGS to facilitate the process at arm's length. So they came to us with a proposal, and we're helping them walk through the project to make sure that it fits with the municipal way of doing business. And the Parks Department goal is to provide the best use of all park spaces for the residents of Nelson, for all the neighborhoods, and that includes listening to the concerns from the residents in all neighborhoods, and especially Rosemont. Currently, the park also contains a bike park, a skate park, and many multi-use trails. And aside to this project, the Nelson Daybreak Rotary plan to install a playground, and they are in the fundraising stages of that project. So
By the skate park, right?
the Nelson Daybreak Rotary plans to build a playground in the green space next to the skate park, yes, just to the north of the washrooms.
Thank you.
Just really quickly, the parks development process, and I apologize to anyone in planning. This is just a real quick overview. So the first question we ask when somebody proposes an amenity be improved is, do we want or do we need this? And this is definitely a want. I don't think the city could demonstrate need at this point. Then we look at the funding partnerships, synergies and opportunities. Given that the NDGS is bringing all of the energy and money to this project, the city can take a really close look at it and maybe facilitate this. The biggest question that we have is, where could it be located? And I believe this question has been asked many times in the past, and the cemetery had been considered, and 10th Street campus had been considered. But based on the nature of the activity and the demand that we're seeing, is the best possible location is Art Gibbon Park. And the preferred location would be a standalone space in the forest somewhere, but we don't have that much land. The next phase after you determine whether you need or you want this is to go to community engagement, and along the spectrum from inform to consult to empower, this fits on the consult with line on the spectrum. And so given that staff weren't directly involved in this, we did ask the NDGS to do the community consultation. After the consultation, you can finalize the plan and proceed if appropriate. So that's the current phase we're at, and that's where we're at today. Just really quickly, the disc golf proposal, and this is the map that they presented, and I added a couple of other map trails in that weren't originally in their proposal, included a concept for the routing of the course, and so that got some people concerned because of the way they had routed the course, and that is their concept, not necessarily the one we would go with. They also will donate the baskets. They also have the energy to install the equipment, and I believe somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 if you consider in-kind labor. They also did a open house at the Rosemont School where they presented their proposal. This was promoted through a number of different media outlets and social media, etc. They also conducted an online survey, and this consultation was appropriate and modeled after the Nelson Daybreak Rotary consultation that took place last fall. They also had on August 2nd a second open house at Art Gibbon Memorial Park where staff were present and listened to some of the concerns raised by the residents and neighbors in and around the park. All the while, the NDGS has made constant adjustment to the plan, and they've been very patient, given that they first brought this to planning almost a year ago. So some of the key indicators from their survey: residence location, almost 2/3 of the respondents, of the 290 respondents, almost 2/3 were from Nelson, and a further 28 were from the regional district of Central Kootenay outside of Nelson. And the Nelson respondents, 180 responded, and there's the breakdown: 39.2% from Uphill, 38.8% from Rosemont. And support for the project was very high at 74% in favor at the time of the survey, and 13% in favor if community needs were met. So only 13% were not in favor at the time. We've also received a lot of opposition to the proposal in the form of petitions, dozens of emails and letters from concerned residents, not only in Rosemont, but in other parts of the community. Their concerns are mostly related to safety. The nature of the activity is considered to be potentially dangerous for bystanders and regular users of the park. They're also concerned that there's a conflict with the course routing and the layout of the trails. So the trails were built first, and so why would the disc golf layout conflict with that? They're concerned about parking, not having enough parking along Choquette Avenue or at the skate park main parking lot. They're also concerned a little bit about the environmental impact and certainly the intended use. There was a concern raised that this park was donated with the intention that it stay a wilderness park, but staff researched that and we found that the city purchased that park with the intention of making it a park for recreational use. So really quickly, I just want to, on this map, show you some of the traffic concerns with West Richards Street here, the Rosemont School being here, and this being Crease Ave. This intersection, you can't see it, but it has about a 15% grade when you get up and around this corner. And along Choquette Avenue, can you see the arrow? Along Choquette Avenue, where the Disc Golf Society originally proposed starting the course, they had said that this would be a parking location, and staff doesn't feel that that's suitable. We would certainly make good use of the main parking area, which is accessed on West Beasley, not anywhere near this particular choke point. So with the golf course development happening, this intersection becomes a bit of a choke point. So we wouldn't want to overload that, and so we're considering starting and ending the course in this area and using this as the parking spot, which it typically is. So if council approves the recommendation, the implementation plan would look like this. We would work with the proponent to design a safe course according to the best practices in disc golf. We would be very careful as how we design that, and we would also communicate that plan to have it properly vetted through stakeholders to make sure that we weren't in conflict with the trails and the other uses that happen in the park on a regular basis. One of the items that the Nelson Disc Golf Society was able to do was to speak to the Rosemont School, who hold outdoor education in the park, and so they've made an agreement with them that if any holes are in the area where they would do the disc or where they do the outdoor recreation, they could put basket or bags over the baskets to eliminate those holes during the outdoor recreation or education sessions. The rest of the implementation plan would include communicating the plan, evaluating the success, the feedback, and the monitoring. So we'd develop a tool for evaluating the success. And prior to opening the amenity, we would post signage installed in conjunction with other park signage, which would we also have to install for the skate park and the bike park. And we would also add signs at all points of entry notifying users of the activity in the park and the routing of the course so that they knew where the conflict points would be. Some other considerations: the NDGS did get support from the Recreation Commission. As I said before, the park is intended for recreational use, and our current parks bylaw does not prohibit flying disc golf or frisbee golf. This course would be constructed to minimize conflicts, and the environmental impact is negligible given that we already have people walking through the park on a regular basis in all areas. No trees will be removed for this other than danger trees as per normal. The park is not protected or preserved. Any conflicts or hazard would be remediated in real time. So if it were brought to park's attention that we had a conflict or there were a hazard, that we would take care of that immediately to make sure that there weren't any injuries or any liability claims. And the one-year trial period will allow staff to determine the efficacy and the impact on the park and the neighborhood. So we would be very careful in how we monitor the activity and gauge feedback. And the proponent has indicated that even within that one year time, if there were issues, they would easily be able to pull their equipment out and repurpose it somewhere else. I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, any questions from Craig? Thanks very much, Greg. Good report. One thing I just want to say is, I've been here for a long time, and I always thought that park was, I didn't realize the city had bought it at some point. I'm glad you went through that research and found, I didn't realize that.
You're welcome.
All right, who's up first? Councillor Renwick, and then Councillor Lochtenberg.
Thank you for that, Craig. This is a really tough one, and I know that there's a lot of Rosemont residents sitting in the audience tonight, and please know I've lost some sleep over this one, as I think a few councillors around the table have. And I'm a recreation guy. I like the fact that this seems to me like a very good proposal and a good sport. I went up to the park in July and looked around. I went up again yesterday morning from about 10 till 11 and walked around and talked to a few people, and it seems to me that the bulk of the usage within the trails is the main trail that you've got laid out on your on the diagram on the map. And yet there's a couple of holes that are within that I looked at that and thought that would be such a shame. Is it feasible that within the layout that we can put all the holes on the north and west side of that trail? Because, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me like that part of the park is least used as far as the trails go than in the center part of the park. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the option is there to scale the course. It's intended to be a course for beginners. It's intended to be a course that would help grow the game. 9 holes is in typical golf is half of an 18-hole course. And so if we tried to fit 9 holes into a tight area, we may have to look at reducing the number of holes. But we would do the layout in such a way that it would be done safely. So if council were to give us direction to confine the golf course or the disc golf course to a certain area, we could do that.
Thank you.
Councillor Lochtenberg. Thanks, Councillor Renwick.
Thanks for the presentation, Craig. As Councillor Renwick has said, I've thought a lot about this, and I've been up to the park 6 times, I think, and spent some time in there. And I brought my daughter and my nieces up a number of times too, just to run around and get a feel of that. I think a key point you made is that it was originally identified to be a recreation park, not a nature park. So I think that was something that we need to underline. A question, and I have a number of comments, but I think I can hold off on those for now. But my question is, can we also, if we moved ahead with this, could we put, for this trial period, some way to signify that there's players on the course? Like a flag at the start, so that any walkers can know that they should keep their heads on a swivel, and if there's a
It's still on there.
yeah, do you understand what I mean? Like some way to let people know that there's players on the course, because I just wanted to say, in general, I played disc golf, and when we're talking about 25 at peak, 12 players on the lower end, we're talking about generally parties of 2 to 4, sometimes 6, 8. So if those numbers are accurate, then we're talking about 1 or 2 over the course, in the low periods, over the course of a day, maybe 5 parties over the course of a high period, which means 99% of the time there'll be nobody playing. It'll just be those rare moments. And so particularly in the mornings when people are walking through, kids kind of cutting through, there's probably never going to be players, or rarely players there. So, but when there are, you definitely would like to know that for sure. So is there, in your mind, is there ways that this has been done to put a flag up as you start to tee off?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm sure there's a mechanism that we could install. I think the challenge that we'd have, that disc golf, depending on how the course is designed, is that you could start anywhere. So if you come to play disc golf and holes 1, 2, and 3 are taken up, then you would move over to holes 4, 5, or 6. I think I think the park does have some sightline issues. We would remediate that by having holes that were all, you know, well in view of one another as best we could. If we were to put a flag at the start, it would be upon the users to make sure that they took the flag down when they were gone. We could try that and see how well it worked.
So it is a trial period for a year,
Yes.
so those are the kind of things that could be. Are you okay, Councillor Lockenberg?
Yeah, I have some other things
Councillor
that I,
Woodward and then Councillor Page. Councillor Woodward and then Councillor Page.
Thank you, Craig, for your excellent informative piece there. I've gone up here a couple of times. I've walked around, talked to people. It's definitely like, you know, contentious. But I have to say one thing that I want to state is that this is a very low barrier sport. So you don't have to have a lot of money. You really just have to buy a disc and you're going. So it's a little bit like soccer that way, you know. I think it's also a lot of children now are not getting out in nature. They're very attached to their screens. So for me, this is a low barrier outdoor experience that kids can get involved in. So I think for me, that's a big bonus. Now I know it's been contentious for the residents around this area, and there's worries and concerns, and I really understand that. But I feel like any way we can get kids out in the woods, being active, getting good hand-eye coordination, the better for our society as a whole. But I do feel like I want to echo what Councillor Renwick was saying, which is about if this goes ahead, that there's a real effort to find a way to have this course. I think what you were saying towards the skate park and towards Richard Street, because of the people could come from their homes off of Choquette and walk around and feel fine, walk their dogs and have some nice times over here, but that there still could be this activity happening on the other side of the park. I feel like there must be a middle road here. We could find a middle road so there's not winners and losers. That's my hope. So, thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, the layout that the NDGS proposed is a concept, and so yes, we would design a course that would make good use of the space, not all of the space, and so we could designate part of the park as certainly an area where people wouldn't be playing disc golf anytime, whether there's a flag up or there's not a flag up.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Page.
This will just be one of those situations where one counselor speaks, so we all have something to say. But this has been before Rec Commission 5, and we've seen this proposal a number of times. And to pick up on Councillor Woodward's point, it is, I think, really important coming from the recreational side that even the modest costs associated with this, we should not underestimate the value of something that you can just go into a park and play a game, and it's got a collaborative element to it and a competitive component to it to really improve upon and give those opportunities for our kids to practice their physical literacy, because it is one of those areas that we are slowly atrophying as a society. So the power of this to me is that 1-year trial, that ability to work with the community and work with the proponent to put something in place that for 1 year we can see and collect some information afterwards, and everyone can know by experiencing and having that in the park, and we can really have a much more realistic debate at the end of a year if there's real problems. But I think this is important for those families that don't have the opportunity and cannot afford to put their kids into soccer and can't afford to go buy a gym pass for the family. But this is one more opportunity within our community to have a good life for our kids.
Thank you.
And one question that I have is, I believe we could limit hours as well, right? It doesn't have to be open all the time, so that is an option. We could also talk to them. There could be times that the course isn't, maybe it's not open on a Saturday or Friday or a Thursday evening, or so that is another option that we can trial to see if there should be periods where it's not open.
So I think hearing the conversation around the table, that the resolution in front of us is probably the way to go. It gives us an opportunity to do much of the stuff the council is requesting, including potentially looking at that idea, although I'm not sure that would work that well. But we have 12 months, and clearly, Craig, you've been working closely with the society to come up with a solution to accommodate for the greater good of the community. So I'm going to ask now for,
I would like to speak.
what do you want to speak to?
You want to get it
You
on
can
the
add
table?
something new?
Yeah.
You're welcome to. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so I love this proposal. I love the idea. When I first heard of it, I was like, oh, slam dunk for the community. This is going to be an easy one. And after seeing, I don't know how many emails, I think I've responded to most of them, but I have not caught up today. 180 signatures on a petition. I looked at those addresses. Those addresses were right around that park. I do think if this goes ahead in a year, the community will like this park. But as if I'm supposed to represent the community right around this park and the users of this park are telling us not to do it. So I'm going to vote against this, even though in my heart, I want to see it move forward. So
this is, maybe just get it on the table, because that's
Okay.
kind of debate versus a
Exactly.
question for Craig.
yeah, okay, sorry, I
Ask
apologize.
for a motion.
I'll move it.
Second? Councillor Anderson? No.
Seconded.
Councillor Luchtenberg? Okay, so any further discussion? Do you want to finish up?
Yeah, sure. And I'll respond to Councillor Anderson's comment. I really struggled with this too. I was a yes right away. Then I was no up until yesterday, actually, where I saw Keith in the park and we had a conversation to walk through. And Keith helped convince me, so blame Keith. No, part of it is
Maybe the vessel.
no. Part of it is the trial, that this is a pilot program, and I looked at other policies that were controversial across the province where there was a pilot, or they just was in the face of broad public opposition. I'm thinking of the bikes in Vancouver and the bike lanes in Vancouver that were widely hated when they were first put in. And then 2 years, 5 years later, they're extremely popular. And this is exactly one of those things. Some of the emails that we received, they're just simply not based on the experience of having been in the park. And so given the numbers that we're expecting, given that we're able to put in all sorts of restrictions to accommodate and try out these things, this is a great learning experience that I think will be the benefit of the whole community. Even if it doesn't mean staying in Art Gibbons at the end of it, we'll have learned stuff that we could apply perhaps at the cemetery or somewhere else. And so just as a learning opportunity, I think it's really going to be valuable. And ultimately, I hope that the community comes on side with it. But if it doesn't, I would be fully open to pulling my support for this. Now, having said that, I would ask staff to develop a decision matrix on this so that the residents around Art Gibbons Park and the Disc Golf Society know what they're working to achieve. So, for example, if parking is one of those elements in that matrix, we track that and we monitor it. Some of the kids and how they're being accommodated just for play, let alone for education, that's into it. So some decision matrix, I think, would be really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, last word. All in favor? Carried. Opposed? Thank you very much. You can always tell when the Canucks are not playing. These meetings go on forever.
Well, you know what? I love this thing, but it's like, send me a bit that.
Annual report. The City of Nelson adopted the Emergency Management Program Bylaw number 3431 in 2018 to establish the City of Nelson Emergency Management Organization and Program. The Director of Emergency Management, on behalf of the Emergency Management Planning Committee, is required to provide an annual report to Council. For for presentation and approval. Council is now requested to approve the annual report. Man, I read through this and I couldn't believe how many times it says emergency management. You know, it was like I was getting choked halfway through it, right? Anyway, great report, folks. Excellent. And thanks for being here. Do you want to give us a bit of overview to start with, and then we'll ask for council to kick in at some point?
I have a presentation.
Chief, yeah, exactly. I see that, yeah.
Introduction.
Oh, yes, sorry, I was going to do that after I said what I was here for. But here we have Dave McAllister. He's the new Emergency Management Coordinator. I think some of you have met him. Very nice and excited to have him here. And I thought I might as well have him come up here tonight. And even though he won't be addressing you directly, I thought just having his presence would be important. Because it's so nice to have him here.
Your wingman?
What's that?
Is your wingman?
Yes. Anything you don't like in here? Dave did. So, at any rate, thank you for allowing us to come present the first annual emergency management report to council. I believe you all have a copy of the report in your package. Hopefully, you've had the time amongst all the other things you've needed to read that as well. Tonight, briefly, we'll be talking about emergency management. We'll touch on the legislation, the bylaw, and the organization that we formed. We'll talk about the hazard, risk, and vulnerability analysis that we've conducted, the emergency management work to date, and where we're going in 2020.
Excellent. You're up there. This is not on
There we
here.
go. There we go. Okay. I won't keep pushing the buttons if it's not going to come up. There we go. So very briefly, emergency
They're handy
management.
around the house.
That's right. Very briefly, emergency management is about local government leading our community in emergency management. And yes, emergency management, when you keep typing that out and I get it spelled, I drop an E every time I spell it, so.
Try reading it.
However, so local government needs to be the leader in it, but it's not exclusive. In fact, one of the things we talk about is whole community approach. And EMBC, Emergency Management BC, has just adopted, because they had to do the BC side of things, an all of society approach. Exactly the same concept. It's everybody in our community. It's everybody from our vulnerable populations right through to businesses to other NGOs, all kinds of groups. Very important that we have that approach. It's also about numerous emergency management plans. It's about training and exercises. It's about identifying the risks in our community, which include the impacts of climate change. It's about building community resilience. Resilience being the ability to withstand and recover from a large, significant event or disaster. It's about having an emergency operations center. And it's about focusing on the big picture during these incidents. It isn't about focusing down to the minutia or what's going on the front lines of police and fire and EMS. It's about what's going on in our community as a whole. And most important, part of my ongoing edification of emergency management is it's about 4 pillars: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. All 4, not just response like I would say historically North America has focused on. So effective emergency management, with that comes, there's community expectations that an emergency management program fulfills. First is that our community expects our local government to have an effective emergency management plans in place. They expect that responders are well trained for all types of emergencies and that they'll be informed of the risks the community faces and to be informed of the hazards that might be imminent and certainly the actions they might be expected to take. I think part of that is setting the realistic expectations that local government isn't all things to all people. Back to the whole community approach. Sometimes there's a number of unreal expectations of what we can deliver. And so by including the larger community, we can do so much more. Another really important part of effective emergency management is economic resilience. And economic resilience through emergency management offers one of the best ways to protect the city and local business interests. It's also the ability to effectively recover from disasters quickly. In other words, get your businesses back in business as quick as possible. And it's also about encouraging future business to invest in Nelson. When other communities or certainly other businesses see that Nelson has a strong emergency management program, it gives them a sense that they're just going to be that much more protected and resilient. So there's really three pieces of Emergency Management Act and legislation in BC. The Emergency Program Act, followed by the Emergency Program Management Regulation, which is largely about provincial actions, and then the Local Authority Emergency Management Regulation. These are all very dated, as you can see, and as you probably, excuse me, you're probably all well aware of, is that the Emergency Program Act is currently going under a review with comment being requested by local government for the review. So when we developed and passed our bylaw last year, it addressed really the three most important things that any Emergency Program Act expects. The first one is, I'll start actually at the bottom of that list. The first one is to maintain an emergency management organization to develop and implement emergency plans. So you have to have that organization. That's just legislation. The second piece is you have to identify the potential hazards that could affect your community. And the third is you actually have to prepare emergency plans to respond to those emergencies when they happen. And like I said, our bylaw covers all those pieces. So then, very briefly, our emergency management organization, that really starts with Mayor and Council. And Mayor and Council are responsible overall for the emergency management program. You can delegate it, which the bylaw has to a large degree, excuse me, except for these four very important tenets. And the one is the requirement to have local emergency program and plans in place. It's your responsibility to have that. If we need to declare a state of local emergency, only you folks can do that, although there's provisions for the mayor and certainly an acting mayor if need be under certain circumstances. It's about authorizing the use of emergency powers under the Act. You have the authority to provide that. And establishing bylaws and policies to facilitate a response. Reporting to the the Executive Emergency Management Committee is the Emergency Management Planning Committee. And this is a group that is intended to provide guidance and support to the emergency management program overall. And it meets quarterly. And requirement to provide an annual report to Council, which is what we're doing here tonight. The report you have is the actual report. This is a presentation speaking to that report. The committee is comprised of myself, the city manager, a councillor that's here on council, the police chief, fire chief, I'm double hatting it right now, the director of development services, the director of public works, director of corporate services, manager of IT, and corporate communications, all whom have a very important role to play in our emergency management program. There's myself. Essentially, my role is to provide leadership to the EM program, to develop a strategic plan for the program, to offer support and guidance to the EM coordinator, to ensure the emergency management plans are in place and they're in fact appropriate, public awareness for the emergency preparedness, and to help establish and maintain Emergency Operations Center, and to ensure we have identified staff who've received appropriate training on a number of fronts, including how to work in an Emergency Operations Center. And then finally, in the case we have to actually open the EOC and activate our plan, I would be one of the persons who would act as EOC director. And this is sort of it in a graphical sense of how that all works. So jumping right into our hazard, risk, and vulnerability analysis, this was done by a group of 16 individuals, 5 of which work for the city or are part of the city, and the other 11 were members of our community representing everything from Interior Health to SPCA to School District 8 and so on. We had a very good cross-section of folks there to represent others in our community. I will say that, and certainly there's a few here tonight that are part of that committee, that we used Emergency Management BC's online web tool, which is, I'm going to say, quite rudimentary and quite dated, 2004. is when this sort of interactive software was developed. And it was important for us to be able to do this on the first go to actually get the basis of this HRVA so that we could build our plans on top of that. We will be, and I'll mention a little later here, we'll be going through another HRVA in the spring of 2020. And then we'll probably do it every third year, even though we'll update it as time goes on. So this is what came out of our results for our meetings that we had. We had 3 meetings of 3 hours each with those 16 people. We walked through this stuff and we came up with various scenarios. I'll be able to share the HRVA with you in the next few days, so you can get more detail if you would like. But quite frankly, there wasn't a whole lot of surprise. We know that wildfire tends to present one of the greatest risks that we have in Nelson. And risks, quite frankly, being comprised of the likelihood of an event occurring and the consequence of that event. And just like the matrix shows there, when those two come together at a fairly high concentration, that we would then be, our risk is just that much higher. Again, for myself, not too surprising, severe weather is also one of our higher risks that we need to continue to plan for. Some of the other ones that are close, extreme weather. Severe weather means sudden severe weather, hailstorm, windstorm, heavy downpour, that sort of thing. Extreme weather would be more like a drought, something that's prolonged heat or prolonged cold time frame. And we could go into more if you have any questions with that later. We can certainly speak to them. So the status of our emergency management program. As council can recall, back when we were doing their priority setting, we talked about the 4-year emergency management work plan that is in place, and we're moving forward with it. Our emergency management bylaw, as mentioned, is in place and working well. We have a number of emergency management plans, both new ones that are being developed and ones we're revising. And many of those are either complete or will be completed within the next 6 months. We're working on a critical infrastructure assessment plan that is now sort of complete in version 1. But like so many of our plans, there'll be version 2, 3, 4. It's an ongoing process to ensure that we're staying on top of things. As mentioned, our HRVA is complete. We have 14 staff who are trained to work in Emergency Operations Center. This is the kind of training that we need to continue on with throughout the year. We've received in the last few years $187,000 in grant funding to help support our program and to build our EOC out. We have numerous public outreach and engagement activities that we've done, and that will be continuing. We have a public emergency notification system that is in place. It is working. We haven't been happy with it, so we've moved to another one. It's looking much more promising, so we will see, and you will notice come certainly the spring of 2020, Emergency Preparedness Week is first week in May. We'll be really launching that. We'll be really pushing that hard. Our Emergency Operations Center design and build is complete. It's we're very fortunate as a city to have this dedicated space for this purpose.
Nasty word.
Sorry?
Nasty word.
Oh, so the question to the chair is, where is the EOC located? The EOC.
Don't tell
What I'd like to do is actually, when I can, you have time to offer you a tour of the place, and certainly Dave is all up to speed in it now, and we're operating it very well. So happy to show that to you. It's located in this building. So going forward is to continue to review and revise existing plans and procedures. Lots of work to do there. I say it's a 4-year plan, maybe it's a 5-year plan, but there's lots of work to do. And I'm feeling very excited that we're actually, especially with Dave here now, we're finding that we're actually making some steps in the right direction instead of, plugging the holes as they sort of come. As mentioned, we'll update our HRVA with a new EMBC program that is available very soon. We'll continue with emergency exercises and training, certainly one of Dave's specialties with his background. continue on with our public and stakeholder outreach, and continue to do work on numerous other plans. I talked about the public emergency notification relaunch we'll do in the spring. We'll also have a community disaster day. We have one every other year. This will be our third one coming up. Continue to promote community preparedness. Continue to work with Castlegar and the regional district about building capacity, how we can support each other and help each other. To improve our emergency support services with the Red Cross. We met with them today and had a conversation. We'll continue to do so to ensure that if a disaster happens, that there's resources in place to help those who need help. We're also going to move forward with continuing to improve the business continuity planning for the City of Nelson, and that same sort of effort to help educate local businesses about the importance of business continuity planning so that they can withstand bad things when they happen. And that is the report. I ask you to receive the report and approve it as the executive committee.
Might have a few questions for you.
Fair enough.
And thanks, that's fantastic, great work that you've been doing since we decided to go down this road. All right, there's hands over. I'll start on the left here.
Oh,
River
second
seat,
that.
okay, second, all in favor? Okay, now.
I just wanted to make a comment. No, it's fine.
Right.
Well, we should have done this in the other order so everyone that was waiting for the last presentation actually got to hear this because it was such good information about how our city's more prepared. So yeah, thank you so much.
Councillor Woodward.
This is kind of near and dear to my heart. I really want to thank you very much for your work. I have been talking about this whole community idea, and I hope I'm doing it right, but I've been trying to get people out in the community to understand that to manage these very scary situations, we all do have to work together as a community and work with you guys and work with the city and be a whole community to approach these. They're really huge issues, and I think, you know, for me, climate change is I'm doing a lot of research, and it can be really scary when you look at it because there's so many different factors that can all happen. But I do feel like really blessed to have this kind of work being done and this kind of groundwork being laid out for our community. So I really want to thank you very much for doing that work.
Thank you. If I may, through the chair, I think it goes back to council for their support and guidance in this matter.
Great. Thank you.
Any further comments? Just on that note, I sent you that link to the fire in Paradise. And what struck me about that, and we're actually in a bit of a similar situation here. They only had 2 roads out of town.
Mm-hmm.
And it devastated the community within like 35 minutes or something. And I sent it's a program that's on Frontline on PBS if you want to watch it. I think people should watch it. And it's about the devastation of Paradise in the States. I sent it to a good friend of mine that was in fire suppression in the provincial government for years. And he talked about the fuel load. It wasn't even mentioned in the movie, but the fuel load was astronomical when they did the eventual analysis. There's very little, if any, work done on preventing a fire from happening in the community. And hopefully we're a step ahead of that in getting rid of some of the fuel load in and around our community. And I think you might want to touch on what's happening in the park currently going up around.
Yes, absolutely.
That impacts our water system. And
so with respect to the mayor's point there is that there's been a fair bit of collaboration on a number of fronts with work that's going on for fuel mitigation. In fact, I would say it's groundbreaking in the amount of work that is being done both in Anderson Creek Timber, that's on that side of town, as well as the private residents on the other side of Svoboda Road, and in BC Parks. They are doing, everyone often thinks about BC Parks as not willing to do any sort of fuel management or treatment, which involves cutting some trees down. They recognize the risk to the park as well, and And with that, that helps to continue to provide protection for our 5 mile water intake. This is great. Lots more work to do. And what we can do in the outer parts of Nelson is just use our influence.
Thank you.
I just want to make one comment, and I think it's an observation. It was really easy before we had all these wildfires very close to our community of, just ticking off the box that, that we had this on the shelf plan, and really when you look at the substance that you need behind that plan, it's night and day from, just having this generic plan on the shelf that you were able to say met the provincial requirements to actually having the substance, and it was, Chief McCharles that, from the past council that initially identified that we need to put some more rigor to that, and we asked the chief to do that review, and that review certainly supported more resources and more direction, and the reason we brought this in-house was to get to us where we are. And the regional district has a huge area, and for them to to get down to this level is just a huge task, and we certainly believe us being able to take it to this level will support both our regional neighbors and our fellow municipalities throughout the region. It's going to take all of us to do our parts to really make our larger region put that in a better place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Did you get the book I left for you today?
Sorry?
I left you a book.
Yes, I did the helmet.
Did you read it?
I read it, yes. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Len.
This next one is
All right.
from them as well.
Oh, same guys coming back again?
I don't think they're necessarily speaking to it.
All right, community resilience. This speaks to similar.
Exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So here we're talking about money though. And we're talking about the UBCN Community Resilience Investment Program. It's a provincial program intended to reduce risk and impact of wildfire by offering local governments grants funding to undertake fire smart and fuel management activities.
Motion.
And you want to move it?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. And the options are: the council passed the following resolution. Council supports Nelson Fire and Rescue Services plan to continue with the important fuel mitigation work in or near the city of Nelson to reduce the impact of wildfires. Therefore, be it resolved, Nelson Fire and Rescue Service be authorized to apply for $10,800 in a grant funding under the UBCM Community Resilience Investment Program, and further that Nelson Fire and Rescue Service staff be responsible for the overall grant management. Moved by Councillor Morrison and second by Councillor Anderson. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favour? Thank you very much, Council. Okay. Active transportation. The Active Transportation Working Group has completed their review of the 2010 Active Transportation Plan, which was presented to Council on October 21st, 2019, Committee of the Whole meeting. Included in the presentation was the updated AT implementation plan. Council is now requesting to adopt the updated Active Transportation Implementation Plan and direct staff to formalize a staff working group and provide Council with an action plan for 2020. And of course, Council, there's an extensive report, and a special thanks to our staff and the community members who worked with Council and Councillor Anderson for chairing the committee.
Councillor Renwick.
And Councillor, pardon?
Renwick, chair.
And Councillor
I
Renwick.
chaired.
You chaired, but Councillor Renwick was there too.
It's all
And thanks to everybody that was part of this. It was a real collaborative effort to get to where we are today. Thank you for your help. Did you want to give us a bit of a
Yeah, maybe I could.
notes there?
Yeah, just a quick presentation. I know I did a bit of review at the last council meeting, but I guess tonight I could just maybe go a bit more in detail in terms of what is in this updated plan. And so, as you mentioned, Your Worship, there was a committee that was struck, and we had a mandate to review the plan, and it was essentially we did do some in-house exercises. We also were out in the community. We went on a a little bike tour, and it was interesting. It was from probably the age gap was from 7 to 70, and we were able to cycle around the city and kind of see what the good parts and not so good parts. And so essentially the key recommendations of this working group was to really, let's look at creating a user-friendly document that we can make sure that everybody can understand and that it's an easy thing for staff and council to refer to and to use in order to really be able to implement. And as part of that would be to provide an updated implementation plan and ensure really that there is yearly tracking so that to make sure we're monitoring progress and successes of this plan. And essentially a big component of this was we need to start focusing on cycling because it's becoming a more of a popular mode of transportation with the electric bikes. So that's a component we've been lacking in the past few years. So that was an emphasis. And essentially the idea was to really kind of take this 50 page plan and create an implementation plan that is really 5 pages long. And this is the document that everybody can make sure that they can read and understand. And the intro page was done in the form of an infographic, which is really what this tells us is the what, the why, and the how of this active transportation plan. So anybody can pick this up and within 30 seconds really understand what this plan is all about. So really it's all about communicating this. And then essentially the meat of the plan is really into this these tables. So there's 2 tables that basically identify what we want to do in the short term. So it is really a 5-year plan. So in the time frame you'll see immediate actions, so things that we want to do immediately. Some short term is really within the next 5 years, and ongoing are things that we're going to be continuously working on. And in order to understand how we're going to achieve some of these action items, it's really about how are we implementing. So there's basically 3 categories. So some items may require capital, some is just operation and maintenance, not necessarily influencing capital, but more so how we do things. And policy and programming is I guess that's self-explanatory. Some of them may require more, one or more of those components to really come to fruition. What will be important is that many of these items will be done, especially if there's capital involved, through grant opportunities. Grant do exist, and we have to take advantage. And I think this plan will really put us in a strong position to be getting some of those grants to build some of that infrastructure that we require. And after that is really who's responsible. So really identified lead departments and secondary departments, and also other agencies that are not within the city. So essentially it's divided in 6 components. So the first one, expanding and enhancing the active transportation network. So there's a series of actions there. Improving wayfinding, signage, and trip planning. So that's important. I think it's all about how we brand this and to make sure that it's an easy way to navigate through our active transportation system. Education and awareness, huge component to this. Safety and traffic calming, what we can do in different areas to really ensure that it is comfortable and safe for all modes, including motorists. Also provide more bicycle parking and other end-of-trip facilities. So that was something that was brought to us by the community. And ultimately is to be able to monitor our progress. And that's important to make sure that we're continuously working on this plan. So an important component of this will be really to formalize this active transportation staff working group to go through this plan and to have ownership. And essentially the plan is shown on a map. I want to make sure that everybody understands this is a living document. Things may change, but it's important to highlight what the primary pedestrian and cycling corridors are and where some of the missing links are have been identified. As I mentioned, cycling is a component that we want to focus on in the next few years. So I just want to touch base on, and these components will be worked on a little bit further, and we'll be bringing some of these plans to council. But initially, the idea is to really kind of look at this bike network or the primary bike network in 4 phases. So the first phase could be High Street. It is a fairly flat road. There are some challenges there, but it's already 30 kilometers an hour. It's already identified with signage as a bike route, and it's already fairly well utilized. So we could start looking at that as an advisory bike lane or something similar to that. And tying into phase 2 would be the 3rd Street neighborhood bikeway that would eventually connect to the bridge, and the province is looking at options in terms of creating active transportation on the bridge. So there's a study being undertaken right now. 3rd phase would be looking at connecting that with Rosemont, and I know it creates a gap in the middle, which is the most complicated part, I would say, is how do we tie that through the downtown. But once you start cycling it, there is a natural way to do it. It's hard to explain it, but it just happens. And then by providing some infrastructure and by detailed planning all of these segments, then all of a sudden we will create a good primary cycling network that crosses the town and that can connect all neighborhoods. And from there, once that is achieved, then we can start thinking about how do we connect secondary routes within the overall system. And what's important, I think, with this is that when bicycle infrastructure is created in many municipalities, there's a lot of pushback. And I think what's interesting is that now you go into some of these cities where you see green painted lines, you see new traffic signals. And for a lot of us, it's all new, but for new generations that are using it, it's just going to become the new norm. And as we go forward, streets aren't going to look like what they've looked like for the past 50 years. They're going to look like something new. And that's just with new users, it's just going to become the new way of doing things. So I think, it's okay to get a bit of pushback when we do these things. And I think as more and more people use them, they will improve. And I think it's a good starting point. So just in terms of what cycling can look like in Nelson, I don't want to, we're not Victoria or Vancouver. I'm not saying that we need to have segregated bike lanes at this point in time, but I think the province has just come up with a guideline on active transportation, and they provide some really good examples of how to deal with this. And this table in the corner here talks about speed on roadways and traffic counts, and that really determines what type of infrastructure you need. So we'll probably often be in the lower segment here, which is really all around neighborhood bikeways. And some of these neighborhood bikeways, it's really all about signage and pavement marking. So there's really easy things you can do, and then it's about creating education around that. And you can go to in terms of traffic calming, you can do certain things to ensure that nobody's trying to shortcut and creating conflict with cycling. So it's about prioritizing and sharing the road for cyclists, and there's some very easy things that can be done. And these neighborhood bikeways are really about road sharing, and they're fairly common. They all look a little different, but the concepts are all the same. It's about creating comfort on the street. Another type of infrastructure that we might be looking at is advisory bike lanes. They're fairly new in North America. Basically, it's a bidirectional center motor vehicle lane, so the cyclists have priority, but the vehicles can still circulate and pass when safe. So really, again, this is just a bit of painting and a bit of education and a bit of signage. And the town of Gibbons has piloted this, and it's been pretty good. The city of Ottawa is using this as well, and they're good when we don't have a lot of road right away, which we all know that's the case in Nelson. So that is something that will be.
Gibson would be a bit like that too. If you did more than 20 kilometers an hour, you'd be in the ocean.
Yeah, exactly.
People living there.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the counts are, but it's been fairly successful.
Yeah.
But I mean, cities like Ottawa are starting to use them just because there's limited right of ways, and you can't start, moving stuff. So this is a way to share the road. And if you're using it on roads where the traffic count is already low and is already slow, posted speed limits, it's fairly easy. Cyclists are cycling almost the same speed of the vehicle, so it's easy to share. So
Sebastian and Nelson, there's so many different options of roads you use as a either as a car or a vehicle. It's not like you have to have one. You come from uphill, there's
yeah,
7 different options. You come from, you know, Upper Fairview, there's 7. You come across the city, there's a bunch there as well. There's definitely some pinch points every so often. But
Yeah.
there's multiple.
we're fortunate to have a tight grid, yeah. And what happens is when you start devoting or start creating cycling infrastructure on certain road segments, then, you know, I think motor vehiclists know that there's going to be more cyclists, and if they want to avoid that, then they have other options. So it's all about, you know, education. So the next step, so tonight we're asking for council to adopt the updated active transportation plan implementation. Then we can go with and formalize the staff working group, and hopefully by December, January, provide council with a program for 2020 and some of the components that we want to start hitting right away. So that would be our plan for the short term. So we would have something to present to council for next year.
Since we have Craig and Colin here, so immediate action item is actually on our sidewalk snowplow routes. We're starting 2 hours earlier in the day now. Right. So we'll be out, you know, at 5 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. to try to get in front of those sidewalks that people are walking on to get to schools and downtown, etc., to, you know, improve that service level. And that was really just shifting when those folks start.
You going by my house at 5 in the morning?
I don't think you have a sidewalk.
I can hear.
You're supposed to shovel your own sidewalk, actually.
Yeah.
Send the bylaw officer by.
Yeah.
He's on the party list.
What's going on here?
That's just an example of something we can do, you know, just by shifting people's time rather than, you know, a big cost to the city.
Well, I think it says in here, one of the prime things that people need to do is to take care of sidewalks as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's in here in the report,
That's,
so.
you know, that's the community has to step up as well.
too,
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a motion here, Council. I'm surprised nobody's jumped all over it yet. Okay, Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Anderson. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? Good job. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Rock and roll.
Got your marching orders.
Yeah, perfect. Now that work starts.
Thanks, Craig, Colin. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Pam.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
take care.
Thank you.
Okay,
Those are hardworking people.
Council calendar
Yeah.
for next year. For all you guys going to Arizona for the winter, you better take a look at this.
Yeah. Oh, let's see.
Maui. Okay. All right, folks, we're back on the saddle here. The calendar's in front of you. Anybody with any specific changes they'd like to make?
Note to Councillor Renwick, but he hasn't noted it.
Oh, what would you like to
I'd
change?
like to change our dates for acting mayor. That's okay with you?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And what you mean change, let's just flip them around?
Just flip them around.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. We're not throwing the whole thing into
No.
disarray?
And then there's the
Okay.
one that Brittany found.
All right, so we're okay with the calendar? You want to move
I have something to say about it. I noticed that we have our committee of the whole right after UBCM. And it's like, that means that we're leaving on a Sunday, getting home to our families
only if you're in an electric car?
on a Saturday. And then you have
Come with
one
calendar, you'll be
day.
home here lots of times.
Well, we're talking about taking a bus, right? So that means we have one day to review everything. And I know we're not making decisions on the cow, but it would be kind of nice to have something like, you know, it would be nice to have, for me, a little bit of time to be able to spend, you know, time not reading my agenda on the 27th. Like if we could bump that a week.
Count in August and not in September.
But you can read it, you
not-
can read it at the UBC.
Yeah, we don't really have any options.
The other thing is, you know, we have the stat on the 12th of October, and then again, immediately we have our regular meeting. So that means that, you know, our entire long weekend means we're thinking about our agenda. So with those, I mean, if it was possible to bump it by a week later or something like that.
We signed on for here, though.
I'm just,
19th.
Well, I think it's perfectly reasonable, I think, to move the cow to even the 29th, even just moving it to a Tuesday.
yeah, fine.
1 day later?
1 day later, just gives you a
In
gap.
September. In September.
Yeah. We do it after the long weekend sometimes, so why not? Not there too. Like, we're going to be traveling for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, those conferences do make it a bit challenging, try to make everything work. But
Yeah, no,
yeah,
definitely.
moving it a day probably.
Because you have FCM as well in there.
Yes.
So, just looking at that, like in terms of the cow and stuff, one is, there's a number of options. One, we have a cow in August and we don't have one in September. And then looking at the dates, I mean, Councillor Anderson does raise an interesting point about October, and that perhaps we avoid all of that bumping up to Thanksgiving and such, as if we don't have a meeting on the 28th, which I think would be nice for staff if we don't have that cow there, if we did the meeting on 5 for the regular meeting and 19 for the cow in October.
And have an August cow meeting?
Yeah.
Or no, I mean, you could have one in August, or we don't have one in August, we don't have one in September.
Or have it on the 4th.
I mean, legislatively, what are our regulations around cows?
I don't have our procedure.
I don't think that procedurally, we have to have that many cows, but we have to have the regular meetings.
But I think you are raising a good point with FCM. Or I think, John, you made this point. Like, we go to FCM, and the very next day, we have a regular business meeting.
We usually have that on the Tuesday, that's odd, that's true that's.
Well, it's like our agenda is going to drop when we arrive to FCM, and then we consume our agenda. And I'm sure it'll be light, but
Usually we have we usually have the business meeting on the Tuesday after the FCM.
Not to my knowledge, do
Mm-hmm.
Really?
is it usually
Yeah.
over the weekend?
I mean,
Because of the travel, it doesn't end till Sunday, and when we're in Eastern Canada, that day of trying to get back, we have historically had, that has always been on Tuesday. It's been one of the few Tuesdays that we actually have a business meeting. It's usually the Tuesday after that. It was this year, it was last year.
Could it be on the 1st?
If you move it to the 1st, I think you solve a ton of all of these
We're talking
problems.
with June here.
Yeah,
I know, but if you start at the 1st and bump that, from then on, you get rid of the September conflict.
Okay. So if people want that, none have changed, then probably we should relook at this, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. If
we look
that's-
at it at the cow, this,
So we're only talking about UBCM and FCM here.
Well, then we're talking after long weekend.
talking about October,
Then
like
it's-
moving it up to the,
Not having a,
going 5 and 19
September
as
cow
opposed to
meeting.
13 and 26.
maybe an August cow meeting, like, people need, maybe give Sarah some, this is pretty standard to what we normally do. But if you guys want something different, then we can relook at this. It's, we're trying to make it work for everyone as much as possible. It's like
Sorry,
I said,
Sarah.
around those longer conferences,
It's your first.
challenging.
No, but hang on a second. Sarah's taken this off our past templates for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah.
We're talking about making a shift here that we haven't done in the past. Right?
Yep.
So if that's the case, then we need to bring it back, just throw it out here again. But you need to have a
Well, we need some direction.
We need some direction.
Well, the FCM one I think is pretty obvious. You can't make it back for the business meeting because if you're on Sunday, you're going to be traveling on Monday from Toronto, so you're not going to.
Yeah, you have, it's historically been on
We could
the,
look at that as possibly the first.
yeah.
That's what I mean. If you
yeah,
want
moving it to the first is probably even better than moving it to the Tuesday.
So-
Yeah.
So maybe just give us, if you don't want them out, meetings after long weekends, please let us know that. If,
That's just only the one that's in
I mean,
conflict.
January,
and you
February,
want at least a
May.
break.
every month's got a long weekend of some kind of
Yeah.
just about, right? So, I mean, I personally have no problem reading my agenda at any time, but I do see the FCM one as being definitely being a challenge.
Yeah, well, let's move that to the first.
So there's one Why don't we try and settle this tonight, guys? If we can. There's no point in sending it back and bringing it back again.
Well, that's,
So let's start with June.
okay.
Well, I like the idea of moving it to the first,
Yeah.
before you go.
Yeah.
So you've got it done, and then you're
So-
on to thinking about FCM, you can even talk about FCM.
Exactly, and
First and
staff has
15th.
more than enough time to
Yeah,
prepare
first
and
and
read.
15th.
Yeah, that
Right.
works. As
Okay.
long as we leave the May cow where it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about June here, we're not going, yeah.
June
And then we're
1st.
going on to July and August, and now we got September, and UBCM is a bit of,
If people want to switch the August for
I would rather-
September and not have a cow
I like
meeting
that.
in
Could we do the
September,
cow on the 14th? Is that even possible?
that makes
Oh, 'cause we
it
just
tough.
had the meeting on the first,
On the 7th?
I like the idea. I think Kevin's got a good idea there. I think having a cow in August is more digestible than coming back from UBCM and having a cow. Like, I'd rather just have one in August and not have it at all in September.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
so then the regular would be the 10th and the
I
cow
mean,
would be
we're-
the 24th.
like, we're coming back from UBCM to a committee of the whole meeting, right?
Yep.
Like, I mean,
don't-
really,
we
they're
don't need
not
to have
that
it.
tough to come home to, you know?
Oh, we also don't probably need to have it.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying, like,
Procedural-wise.
Tend to have a lot of demand for your cow meetings, so
yeah, I
that
know,
just
that's,
means you tell some people they can't come.
but the cow meeting, generally speaking,
And we
is
can,
not that tough to have.
we could do that on the 29th, if that's just another day that
Yeah.
people
Do
want.
that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just
Sure.
move it one
Tuesday?
day.
Yeah.
Put it on Tuesday.
Okay, so let's go back, we're okay with August then? It stays as is?
Yeah.
And we're into September, and we're gonna go with the 29th.
Correct.
Is that okay?
Everybody's good with that.
October,
Could we move Christmas to the 28th?
Yeah. That'll fix things.
so,
I mean,
so we're okay?
Wow. 21st, hey, the Monday, the first of the week of Christmas.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
Do we
Any
usually?
adjustments?
Can I just read them back?
Yeah.
Okay. For the regular meeting, January 13th, February 3rd, March 9th, April 6th, May 4th, June 1st, July 6th, August 17th, September 8th, October 13th, November 9th, and December 7th. For cow meetings, January 27th, February 24th, March 23rd, April 20th, May 19th, June 22nd, July 20th, September 29th, October 26th, November 23rd, and December 21st.
Yeah.
Okay?
Moved by,
So the other wrench I want to throw in this is, do we want to have a discussion about having some of these earlier, like the last crew you guys had, cows at 1 o'clock, every alternating cow, to make it more accessible for people who aren't necessarily going to be able to come out in the evening.
He was not well attended.
Well, and people work. You work.
Yeah.
You guys, some of you guys work, right? Like,
I have to take time off.
Yeah, for me, I have to take off the whole, like, the whole day, right? Like,
Could
did you
be,
take off the whole day today?
Well, when an agenda drops, like Thursday afternoon, I pretty much have to just
one of the
squirrel away
reasons
and work on this instead of.
I like the meetings, like, we had some, you know, the meetings have been regular at certain times, and people do get used to those.
Yeah, no, that's fair too.
So
But
maybe
I
we
know
can
it
adopt
costs,
this
yeah.
tonight, and if you can give that more thought, you can always change the time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, moved by Councillor Rochtenberg
Change for
yep.
deputy mayor.
with the
so.
changes,
Yeah.
seconded by Councillor Woodward, all in favor? Carried, thanks very much. All right, calendar, next is up, correspondence.
The acting mayor's.
Meeting or two or 10 off.
Oh, yeah, that's on there too, sorry, I beg your pardon.
I'll move receipt on the,
No, we're,
No, we're changing it.
oh,
We're changing Councillor Renwick and Councillor Morrison, flipping those
Yep,
two over.
that's totally fine. So
Yeah,
I've
with the
got-
change, with the change.
with the
oh,
change.
okay.
Moved by Councillor Woodward with the change.
Yep.
Seconded by Councillor Renwick, because it's,
sure.
you guys wanted to change. Or you did, Janice. All in favor? Thank you. All right, onward
and
now.
the annual reception.
Is that in there too?
I'll move
Yeah,
that.
14th.
Okay. December 14th. Already on.
That's where it was.
Yeah, we have to move it.
Moved by
Moved by
Councillor
Councillor
Anderson,
Anderson.
second by Councillor Page. All in favour?
It's on.
Thank you. What the hell day is that, eh?
14th.
Another
It's on there.
Monday.
It's on there, it's the 14th.
December's a funny month this coming year.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda, folks, is we have information items and correspondence, minutes from the various,
I'll move that.
move receipt of the Nelson Library Advisory Planning Commission.
I'll move that.
Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. And B is accounts payable and building permits. Any questions or comments on that? Hearing none. I'll have a
Comments?
question.
Building permits are
Who's gonna-
off the charts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can we just, so, sorry, can I just ask a question about that?
Depends on what the question is. You want to send it to me in writing first. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Kevin, so when you say off the charts, can you just talk a little bit about what kind of spike we're having here?
If you look at the year-to-date on the building permits,
On the
the
building
numbers,
Yep,
similar, which is the challenge of a planning and building department is, there's almost as much work on smaller ones as larger ones, but
right.
you can see the value is significantly higher in that. Those are those large multifamily projects that are working their way through the process. So I think this is 2 of them. There's one more that will be coming soon, and I heard from Venger Retirement. They're hoping to start in the spring on Vernon Street here, and there's others that Woodward's project might go then as well. So we're going to be flat out for at least another 2 or 3 years, if not longer.
Yeah, the jump here in single family dwellings, I guess, and multi.
Yeah.
It's huge, it's just unbelievable.
Or the value of them, right?
Yeah.
It's not the number, it's how much they're each individually worth.
Worth.
So,
Okay.
nicer homes.
On that note, could I ask you just off the top of your head, how many of those are actually going to be paying tax to us?
I think
All of them,
All of
Yeah.
them?
but they may come to council and ask for
Yes.
tax action.
Good luck.
that's in your control.
Okay, move receipt, please. Thank you. Action items. Well, how could we possibly have action items? So in that bundle, folks, you're more than welcome to grab 1 or 2 out of there, or all of them if you want, and give a question of Colin or Kevin or any of these other folks around how we're managing them or how we're getting to the end result. You're welcome to do so. Hearing none, move receipt. Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Renwick. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much.
Back in camera.
Motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Page. All in favour? Carried. And